It's a bunch sprint for the World Championship here in Aalborg. I'm in a good position, just pinching my shoulders to get in between them, and now it's waiting on the swerve because that's what's going to happen. Everybody is going to start sprinting. The guy from the right is coming in, he's touching the Dutch riders. What's up guys, what's up cycling fanatics? This is the World Championship Gran Fondo in Aalborg. Until I found out about this race last year, I didn't even know that there was an official World Championship for amateurs, complete with UCI officials checking for hidden motors at the start line. I set this as one of my A goals for 2024, as I thought that I would have a proper chance on becoming a world champion.
1 week prior to the Gran Fondo World Championship. Today we did the race simulation, 5 hours, balls to the wall.
All of this turned out slightly different, but before we jump into the race, let's talk about the bike, the course, and also my new camera setup. Thanks to Insta360, who will become a channel sponsor for coming year. I'm using the Insta360 X4, which has dual 180-degree lenses that stitches it together for a full 360-degree view. It works great to capture all the action around me, like this when I'm being sandwiched between two Belgian competitors like a Brussels waffle. I've mostly used my GoPros and I've limited experience with the 360 footage, so let me know if you like it. I want to keep it kind of realistic, so I won't be doing much of these tiny planet effects, but I will use the freedom to look around and to show you some key moments in this race. I mounted the X4 on top of my headset for this race, since the official out front handlebar mount wasn't available yet. Besides that, I think this perspective is actually great for racing because you can still see the handlebars, so it will give you the idea that you're actually there. Now let's jump into the bike. It's the Polygon Helios A8X, which I've actually been riding for over a year now, and I absolutely love it. I've been training on it a lot, and I took it to the Mallorca cycling camp earlier this year where I set a new PB on Sacalobra. By the way, if you're interested in a week full of fantastic riding, you should definitely join me on Mallorca coming year. Check out all the camp details in the description. The Helios A8X comes stock with great components, like the 12-speed Ultegra Di2 group set and the Vision Metron handlebars, making it almost race ready right out of the box. This is a top performance bike for an affordable price, only available through bikesonlineusa.com. The only major change that I made was to cut off the steer tube and swapping the wheels for my favorite Loom Performance Mega wheel set. For this race, this setup would be ideal because even though it was a 150km Gran Fondo, it was pretty flat for a Gran Fondo. Very flat. Which is also the reason why I wanted to race this World Championship, because I would actually have a chance on a good result. Believe it or not, I'm not a climbing specialist. Even with all the climbing I've done in haute route events in the past years, I can still perform better on flat terrain. So here we are at the start, alongside my race buddy Dan and hundreds of other competitors. You've seen Dan on last year's Etape de Tour Denmark, where we took the yellow and the green jersey in that race. We're not in front of the start box at all, but with a pretty flat race and hardly any wind today, I wasn't too worried about getting to the front before anything would happen, which was actually a piece of cake, and within 2 kilometers I was in the front of the peloton. The course is 150 kilometers, which was actually very short compared to the 180k gravel World Championship that was on my calendar a few weeks later. It had a 10-kilometer lead-in and finish segment in and out of the city of Aalborg, and then a big loop through the Danish countryside with all hilly terrain. So nothing was flat, but the longest kind of real climb was only 1.7 kilometers. The total elevation was 1300 meters, so that's relatively low for a Gran Fondo. I was aiming for a top 5, assuming I would show up in good shape. But after the Cape Epic in March, I was completely wiped out for about 3 months. I had a hard time training and recovering effectively. I finally started feeling good again just about 6 weeks before this race. But At that time, I was also pretty busy reconstructing the house for the arrival of our third child, which was 2 weeks overdue, so she was born only 2 weeks before this event. So the agenda got a bit tight. Now, before you guys call me crazy for going, being away from home 4 or 5 nights a week, every week is part of my usual day job. So being at home for 2 weeks paternity leave was already quite luxurious. Besides that, baby Julia was actually very, very chill, and I planned to fly home the night of the race to take the boys to school the next morning. The first 10K and also the last 10K, because we do the same exact roads in opposite direction, was almost a bit like a criterium. Also with a lot of road furniture, twists and turns, roundabouts, speed bumps, poles and trees and everything alongside the road. So I just wanted to stay as far as I could to the front just for safety. I noticed when I was in the pack in the couple kilometers before this that it's pretty nervous. Everyone is taking weird lines, and it was just so much safer just to stay out here in the front. Obviously not at the front, but close to the front. Now with this camera setup, you can actually see my head unit. For this race, I was using my Wahoo, and a lot of guys are asking me if I can use the Wahoo with Eat My Ride, which is the nutrition planning app that I use. And yes, this is all possible. I just plan all my nutrition ahead of time. I use the app to calculate what I need, and then I stick to the plan. So during the race, you won't get this live glycogen burn field on your Wahoo, but all the data will shoot to the app after the race, so you can still analyze your data afterwards. And if you just know that you need 1 bottle of Martin and 1 gel for every hour, that's pretty easy to take in a 3.5 hour race, so that's no problem. I was riding with my map display for almost the whole race, because with races like this, it's very important to know where you are going. We will go out of the city, and then every turn will mean a change in direction of wind, if there's any wind. So if there would be echelons forming, it would be very, very important to know if you have to be at the front in the next corner or not, or if you can just stay in the peloton. If it's a straight headwind, then it's very easy to just stay in the wheels. But if it's a heavy crosswind, for example, you need to be at the front because it's gonna break up very quick. At this moment, I'm just following wheels. I'm in the peloton. It was a long way to go, and I wanted to save as much energy as I could. I was not planning to go in any breakaways, especially not from the start. It gets pretty crazy sometimes, bumping each other through these corners. So the further you are in the front, the less chance you have to be behind a crash or behind somebody that makes a weird move or whatever. So when I was riding in this position, I was like, wow, I need to get back out to the front, because I don't want to be in the middle of this peloton for too long. So this is 133K to go. So we've got 20 kilometers in this race. Climb is coming up. Like I said, hilly terrain, no major climbs, but all these short punchy climbs would add up in the end. So these short climbs, we do them at 400, I do them at 450, 500 watts. So it gets pretty intense after doing a few of those. My head unit switches over to this climb display, which I don't really like always, but this does give me an idea, like 500 meters to go for this climb. And then one feature of this camera is that I can look around, like I said before, so that's actually pretty cool. You can see everyone is very, very close together in these climbs, because this was it wasn't a super wide road, but wide enough for like 6 riders next to each other. So pack stayed together for a long time. As we reach the top of this climb, you don't even see that it's a real climb on the video, I know, but it was a climb. As we get to the top, then you'll notice that when we go downhill, legs are still, just like the guys in front of me. So maybe in the front they're still pushing a bit, but if you're in the peloton, the draft will become so big that you don't even have to pedal, and you actually have to brake, otherwise you'll overtake the riders in front of you, which is impossible because there's no space. So just stick in the group and try to pedal as least as you can. Actually, that's what I was trying to do all day, to save energy, because I knew that I was not in super good shape. I did a big training ride a week ahead of this race to test my legs. And I went with Dan and 2 other friends. I was pushing super hard straight from the beginning. And then after about 3.5 hours, I was pretty dead. So I knew that I had about 3.5 hours in the legs, and that's it. Here you can see it's going uphill and we have a little bit of wind. So it's all stretching out straight away. And I knew this was going to be a long false flat section. So I wanted to be a bit in front. So I'm trying to squeeze in here. But then this guy from Poland, he's like, keep your line, keep your line. He's using his hands to push me on my butt. I'm like, dude, keep your hands on the bars. It's still 120k to go. Why are you so stressful? Just let me in. And then the rider from Belgium, he's like, yeah, come in. So I just go in front of him. I go into the line. And I just don't understand why some people are so stressed out when it's such a long way to go. If it's in the last 5k, obviously you don't want to give up any spots. But right now we had such a long way to go. So I just didn't get it. He got a flat tire right now at this very moment. So maybe that was his karma. I don't know, man. So the day before the race, me and Dan went out to recon the course a little bit. So the first 30k and the last 30k we checked it out. So I knew here there was also a little climb coming. And look behind me how big this peloton is. Hundreds of riders are behind me. And I'm nicely at the front, which is the better position. Right here we can already see riders from a different category, which we are overtaking. There's actually quite a few categories. It starts with 19 till 34-year-old. I'm getting older, so I'm in the 35 till 40 category, which isn't slower. I mean, these guys are just as fast or faster than the younger category. And then there's a category for every 5 years, all the way up to like 80 years old. So there's a lot of different categories, and they all have a different number on the back. So we are riding with these pink numbers, and you'll see later in this race, there's a lot of different colors. And in hindsight, I would definitely have preferred to race in the 19 till 34-year-old category, which I'm going to show you why later in this video. Alright, we are approaching a climb. We're on a downhill now, and I'm already telling the guy in front of me, like, go, you need to go, you need to go. Because I knew there was a couple sharp corners coming up. And then narrow bridge, steep climb. We checked this spot out the day before the race specifically. So I knew this was coming, and I wanted to make my way up towards the front. You will see now it's already stretching out in a very big line, and this could have definitely be a moment where it would break up into at least 2 or 3 groups. Making my way to the front, I'm just riding and I'm overtaking these guys because I know what's coming up. And this shows how important track knowledge is. And we didn't have the time to check out the entire racetrack, so the whole 150 kilometers, but we did the first like 20k and the last 20k, and then 1 or 2 separate spots. And this was one of them where we thought this may be an interesting or an important spot of the race, and we went to check it out ahead of time. So yeah, I was happy that I was here in a good position. Everything stayed together. Like I said, it may as well just been broken up into pieces. I was in a very good spot here at the climb. This is going up with like 6%, 7%. So we're doing quite high speed and high power because it's all short climbs. And then as we get to the top of the climb, we're straight in an open field. If it would have been super windy, right now it would have been freaking chaos. It would have been a fight to get into a good position, echelons, everything. In this case, it's just single file and riding very hard, but it may have well just been a freaking battlefield on the top of this climb. 110k to go. We see the motorcycle over there in the front, and then Dan is the first rider at the moment. He's making some pace. He just passed me just before this. And he's like, dude, I was in the peloton back there. It's freaking chaos. Everyone is going zigzagging all over the place. So he was happy to be out here in the front. Dan, he was looking for a very hard race. He was super fit coming into this race. That big workout that I did a few weeks back was with Dan. And he dragged me back home because I was empty. His strength is more like for a long breakaway or like a very long, hard race. So he was looking for it to break up. Or today, if it would be a very, very windy day, that would be perfect for him, because then it was going to be a very hard race. The group was going to split up right away. For me, it was the opposite. I wasn't as strong as I wanted, so I was going to try and stay in the peloton for as long as I could. Try to hide, try to ride the wheels, save as much energy the whole day until maybe I could, pull out a sprint at the end if I would, still have the legs. So two complete opposite or different strategies. Going up a climb here, quite steep actually. Always trying to start in the front and then try to manage my power, and then I'm sort of going backwards into the peloton on the climb to not fall off in the back or be behind a big gap or something. So you can see guys are overtaking me. That's just because I'm pushing slightly less power on purpose, and then I let guys overtake me, and then in the next downhill or a few corners I would just overtake some riders back, and I'm back at the front, and I do this every climb, so I save a bit of power, of energy on all of these climbs. So after every climb there's a slight downhill, nothing steep, but it's a good moment to get some drinks in. I planned with 2 big bottles at the start, and then we would catch 1 bag of water bottles somewhere at the feed zone. We found a girl that wanted to help us in this race, because 3.5 hours is just a bit too long for 2 bottles for me. I need like 750 milliliters per hour. We've done 45 kilometers and it was quite easy. I mean, I didn't have very good legs. I didn't have that much fitness. So for me, it was all good. But I noticed that it wasn't that hard. My power neurons weren't that big. So I just knew that it was a very easy race so far. The days before this race, it was very windy, as we heard from some guys that were here before. If it was windy on this day, it would have been so much harder, because then on all these straight stretches of road out in the open fields, it would break up instantly because echelons would form, and it would be a very hard race. It would be fight for 3.5 hours. But now it was just pushing hard on the climb and then sitting in the draft as much as I could. So for me it was all good, but I know for Dan, for example, he was looking for a hard race. So for him was maybe even a bit frustrating that there was no big attacks. It was just quite easy until now. Okay, 83 to go. That's almost halfway. Some attacks were starting to happen. I was a bit further back, but no problem. Find your moment when it's not going super fast, and then you can just roll to the front like I'm doing now. I'm only pushing like 200, 250 watts. So it's quite easy, and then you're back at the front. Always try to save your energy. Don't push to the front when it's already going really fast or on a climb or whatever. Find your moments when it doesn't require that much energy. At this moment, I had to stay vigilant. I wanted to keep up the front and not like follow attacks myself. I just let all their guys chase. I'm here to maybe eventually try and sprint for the finish, but I'm not looking for a 70-kilometer breakaway. I just don't have the legs for that. So, however, if a group would stay away, like a big group with 20 riders or something, I would definitely want to be in there. And finally now it seemed to speed up a little bit with some guys attacking. So let's see what's going to happen in the coming hour. 80k to go, and Fabian Porco goes. He attacks. He's from Belgium, probably one of the strongest riders in this field today. Nobody responds at first. A couple guys pointed out, and then look what happens, man. The entire freaking nation of Belgium starts chasing him. So I didn't have to do it because his own countrymen are chasing him. Great stuff, man. Now I know that I don't have to go follow any Belgian riders because they're just gonna chase each other. Also, there is more Belgians in this race than any other country. They're far outnumbering all of us, and I saw a lot of this happen. But to be honest, It's an amateur level, and probably every individual here would rather see himself on the podium than anyone else. And I kind of agree. I have the same actually with my fellow Dutch riders, except for Daan, who is my friend, and we traveled here together to race here, and we race more often together. But even though we're not in the same team, we know each other's strengths, and we would let each other win if they would have a good shot. But all the other Dutch riders, I actually don't know these guys. And maybe it's the same for all these other guys, including the Belgians. They're all wearing the same national jersey, but if we don't know each other, or if we not have agreed on a strategy or whatever, why would you let somebody else win if you think that you have a good chance yourself? It's kind of inherent to the amateur cycling, in my opinion. Most of us have jobs, partners, kids, whatever. We're not paid to ride our bikes, and we're not in an official team together where everybody has his job. So, you know, I get it. But that said, it made this day into a very chaotic race, because it seems like everybody was just randomly riding anywhere. 70k to go, we're on a climb, and now we're overtaking a very big group of the 19 till 34 category. They started like 2 minutes ahead of us. We've been overtaking riders of this category for the whole day, but now it was a very big group, and it's difficult to keep an overview in this situation. As we're now overtaking big groups of all the categories, it's going to be very hard to see which rider is who. Like, the guys that are in front of us, are those our riders or are they from the other category? I know we have a different number plate in the back, but you can't see that when it's 100 meters away. Or right now, when there's a big group and I'm 50 riders back in my own category, by the time I get to the top of this climb, who's going to be riding in front of me? I have no idea if it's 50 riders or 30, and it's also impossible to stay in first wheel the whole day. So this is really, I feel, one of the big issues with these different categories and racing in these categories where they mix it up and when you're overtaking. And I noticed the same thing when I was doing the qualifier for this event, because you have to qualify to be eligible to race the World Championship. So by doing one of these World Series events and finishing in the top 25%, you qualify to race this World Championship. And I raced the Schlek Gran Fondo. It was the same thing. After like half an hour, we started overtaking, and then it turned into a big chaos. 60k to go. This is where we have our feed zone, where we're gonna grab a bag with some bottles. That was the idea. Daan is in front of me, sticking his hand up right now. I'm trying to keep a bit of distance, so we have 2 bags, and I can get the second bag. So both of us will get like a refill of our bottles, of our nutrition. And right there, Daan grabs the bag, but it slips out of his hand. And I wasn't able to grab another bag. So we have nothing. It was a bit of a downhill segment. I don't understand why they don't do this feed zone in a climb, because then you actually, you know, you're going so much slower and it's way easier to grab the bag or the bottle. If you're doing 40k an hour or more, then it gets very difficult to either hand or grab those bottles or those bags. So now we have 60k to go. That's an hour and a half at least, with no more fuel. I had a little bit of my bottles left because it wasn't that warm luckily today. So I anticipated to only have like a drink mix in my bottles at the start, and all the other carbohydrates I would take in with gel. So I would only have to get some water from the sideline. Now I didn't get the water, but I do have my carbs, so that's quite important. We'll see how I make it to the end of this race. 45k to go, the pace is picking up, and it seems like a few more guys are willing to push a bit harder. Few riders are already up the road, and the difficult thing now is because the way that the organization designed the race, the older categories that started after us were doing a shorter distance, so they ended up ahead of us on the same course as we got closer to the finish. So now you're gonna see even more different colored numbers from the older categories. So we're talking about 60 years and over categories that are ahead of us. And I think this was a big mistake, and it actually created very dangerous situations in this race. It's not fun for us. It's not fun for the older categories that are overtaken by big pelotons of crazy guys going super fast, pushing them out of the way because everybody thinks that his race is the most important. Obviously, it was just a chaos, man. 39k to go. That's less than an hour. The guys that went up the road, we caught them back. So we're still in one group. Obviously, there's probably drop riders of our category, but it's still a big group. I'm still in the front of the race. I think this is going to turn out into a sprint. I mean, it's not been a hard race until now. Obviously, the pace will pick up a bit in the last part. I'm still trying to save as much energy as I can to set up for a bunch sprint. And right now I am at the front, but I'm not pushing that hard, and I'm just pushing to the front because I see there's a corner coming up, which is always nice to go through as the first few riders, because the other riders will always be braking more than you are when you're riding in front. And here you can see how big this group of riders is behind me. It's hundreds of people, and it's now mixed categories because all the guys that are overtaken by us of the 1934 category or of the older categories, they're trying to hang on to us. But sometimes they even try to slide in after a few riders of our category overtake them. So that just makes all these weird situations. 33 to go on a climb. Fabio goes again. I told you guys, he's strong, and yeah, a lot of guys are aware and they are chasing him. I'm just trying to manage my power. I'm already pushing like 500 watts on these climbs, and now again you see these brown numbers, blue numbers. All of these categories are mixed, and you can see the speed difference between us. That's so big, so it gets crazy, man. And this is really the reason why I actually would have preferred to race the 19 to 34 category. That's old news. I'm 35 now, so I can't. It's not an option. You can't go down a category, so it's impossible. But at least if you're the first category, then this will save you a lot of overtaking. 30k to go, and Dan is in an attack. He's all the way in the front, almost out of the picture. Orange jersey, and he's trying to attack. I knew he was trying to force a breakaway because that was his strength. I am not following him, so I'm just waiting patiently. I let other guys ride in front of me. I was definitely not gonna close this gap on him. Only if there would be like more than 5 or 6 riders chasing him, then I would go with them, because then we would be with 2 out of 5 or 6 and we'd actually have a good chance. So other riders that come from the front, I just let them slide in. I was not gonna push at all. Little climb here. We have cobbles in the middle of the road and only a quite narrow, smooth part on the side. So yeah, we're all trying to ride on the smooth tarmac. But also, again, overtaking these categories. It's what's gonna be like this until the finish. So the chaos is only going to get bigger from here. And then at the top here, we turn into this pretty wide road, and that was actually a very big downside for Dan's situation, because he's now in front pushing very hard to keep up his speed, and maybe he has like 1 or 2 guys with him, I don't even know. And we are with a big peloton, and as you can see, I don't even have to pedal to stay in the wheel. So we're gonna go like 60k an hour easy, and he's pushing all out until we got to the next climb. 23k to go. I had marked this spot in my head because it was kind of the biggest climb, and it was so close to the finish that I knew that this was going to be a key point in this race. I was on the gas to keep up with the front guys, and I had to go so hard. I actually did a few max efforts on this climb with like a maximum heart rate of 202, which I have not seen for a long time. Also a 1-minute power PB of this year amongst a few others. So this climb was pretty hard. The high heart rate would probably be because of the big effort, obviously, and I think the low amount of training that I did in the past weeks, my body was actually relatively rested and able to get it so high, which is crazy because we just got a new baby, and that always seems to be a very tough time. But I actually managed to sleep quite well in the 2 weeks leading into this race, since I also didn't have to get up very early for work and all that stuff. So here we get very close to the top, and that's when I passed Dan, who has been hammering it on his own for a few kilometers until now. And at this point I completely lost track who's who's in front of me or who's not, and all the riders are of mixed categories. And as long as all these riders are still pushing, I would just follow, because I don't know who's who. Right here you can see 3 riders up ahead of us, and that would probably be of our category, but at this point I didn't have the legs to close this gap after this climb, so I had to wait for another few riders to take over. Sweden is taking a detour here, almost crashing himself, and now we are riding into another big group. It's less than 20k to go and everybody's anxious, trying to stay up front. We have lots of riders of multiple categories here, all mixed up together, creating these dangerous situations. It's like painting with my 4 and 6-year-old. You start with a bunch of nicely separated bright colors, and by the time you're almost finished, it's just running into one big brown mess and you can't see what's what and who's who. $60k to go, total chaos. I was still in the assumption that I was riding in the first, like in the front of the race, but there may very well be some guys that got away. I honestly couldn't tell at this point. So we exit the hilly countryside and we go back in the city towards the center of Aalborg, where the finish is gonna be at the same location as where we started. Here I ended up kind of in the front. I just take a turn and then get off the front as quickly as possible, and then maybe sliding back like 10-15 wheels maximum. I don't want to go too far back because then it's a big effort to get back to the front. Here we go into the last 5 kilometers and it goes back into sort of being the last 2 laps of a criterium. Very sketchy. We're on the same city roads that we were on at the start. So lots of twists and turns, road furniture, speed bumps, trees. Very important to stay vigilant. And you know, this is actually, I really like racing like this. But also it's been quite a long time ago that I've done crit racing. I've been focusing more on these longer races. I've done the Cape Epic, I've done the Haute Route stuff. So I've hardly been doing any crits. So I'm a little bit rusty. Also riding in the pack with a lot of riders, like side to side. Maybe I'm a little less like reckless or whatever. Now that I've got 3 kids, I'm a bit more careful sometimes. I did not want to go home here with a broken arm, so I definitely would, you know, squeeze the brakes a little bit when I have to, when I see a very dangerous situation. Moving my way up to the front quickly here to see what's up. Dan is still in the mix. He's right in front of me, doing good pace. I'm sure that he was just trying to stay safe and out of trouble. That's the reason why he's close to the front right now. The swarm will come somewhere close to the finish and you have to be ready for it. Approaching a corner and then other categories right there. So these situations, if you're not single file, then definitely you would have to start braking to go around these guys. So for me, it's the best to stay here. And it's going fast, but it's still quite easy to stay in the wheels. My legs were definitely not great today, and I was pretty tired after all these climbs going full gas. But I always have a little bit of sprint left. So I was just assuming that I would still have a sprint. So I was racing to be able to sprint. That's kind of what my idea was at this moment. Attacks left and right, slightly uphill. Obviously guys are going to attack. As long as I don't get a big gap, I'm still okay. Only like 2.5k to go, so everybody wants to be at the front. You see it gets very crowded here in this corner, and then we squeezed in between these 2 Belgian riders. You didn't really see that, but let's have a look at a different angle. That's why these cameras are so cool. we turn around and then boom, that's a big squeeze. Everybody's leaning into each other. And then if you want to look it back, there's actually one guy who kind of dive bombs the inside and then grabs a handful of brakes, holding up everyone on the inside, and that's why everybody kind of slammed into each other. This is fun, guys. This is racing. We're definitely setting up for a bunch sprint in this race. So it's a bunch sprint for the World Championship here in Aalborg. 2K to go. I'm in a good position. I'm somewhat at the front. I'm trying to stay somewhat to the side of the group. So here I'm on the left. Obviously, I'm catching a little bit of wind, but it gives me opportunities. It gives me a way out. If I'm in the middle on the right, sometimes it can go so quick. In 100 meters, you're 50 riders back. And that's really shit, because then you have to make it up. In this position, if I want, I can go around and I can make it up easily. I can do one short effort and then be in front in the next turn wherever I want. Couple 100 meters to go. This is a big road. It's going downhill, and guys already start sprinting. It's going to get crazy. There's like one little zigzag coming up that I wanted to be more in front. So right here I'm getting in between these guys, absolutely squeezing through, just pinching my shoulders to get in between them, and then zigzag. I'm back in position, and now it's waiting on the swerve, because that's what's going to happen. Everybody is going to go on the gas. We're gonna look around me. Everybody is going to start sprinting. This is the swarm, so I'm sprinting to keep my position. A guy from the right is coming in. He's touching the Dutch rider, so I pinch my brakes. I lose a bunch of momentum. I have to catch back on my speed, sprinting to get back in position. There's one right turn, and then there is the finish. Through this corner, and there's a bunch of more riders, which I don't know which category they are. Sprinting here, overtaking one more Belgian rider. I'm quickly counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth spot over the line. So the Dutch rider that was ahead of me, he thought he was on the podium. I thought I was fifth. Then I saw Dan after the finish, and he told me there was one Finnish guy who got away in the last few hundred meters. I didn't see that, so that meant I was sixth. But then looking at the results, I turned out to be 12th. So what was going on? We all thought we were sprinting for the win, but it turned out that somewhere with about 20k to go, a small group actually got away. Probably at that last very tough climb. And we never noticed with all these groups mixing up. Nevertheless, I was happy with the results, and I was glad that I made it out unscratched, as a few weeks later was the World Championship Gravel. So subscribe to the channel and stay tuned, because that video is coming up soon. See ya!